Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Enterprise Unplugged. I'm Tom Cox, Commercial Director at Exertis Enterprise, and I'm joined today by illustrious leader, Jason Chibnall. How are you today, Jason?
I'm great, Tom. A bit apprehensive that they wheeled you out to question me, but I'm feeling really great about the session.
Fantastic. Well, today's theme is based around the question time. This is a great opportunity for our customers and our vendors to get to know you better, your thoughts on Exertis Enterprise, your thoughts on the market, both good and bad, technology, and then find out a little bit more about you and have a little bit of free and easy conversation. So there will be a few curveballs in there, a couple of questions that hopefully will put you on the spot, which will bring out your true personality, which I think is important. You happy with that?
I'm happy with that, Tom. Depends how deep you go, but I'm happy.
Good, okay. So let's start with you. So in no longer than 3 minutes, now I know you're going to struggle with this one, but give it a good shot. Give me a rundown of your professional journey to this point.
Okay, so I've been MD of Exertis Enterprise. This will be my 4th year. Prior to that, I had 15 years with DCC Technology, who own Exertis Enterprise. And prior to that, I had a career as a technologist. So I worked with people like Blockbuster Video. So I was on the board of Blockbuster Video here in the UK and also in Asia. I worked with the Fast Food International, so McDonald's, KFC, Taco Bell. I worked for an American corporation that provide hardware platforms for all of those partners that we had around the world. So that's me and my potted history in 3 minutes of how I've got here.
A star-studded history, I'd say.
I don't know if it's star-studded, but it's been varied, and I've gained a lot of experiences as I've done it, and enjoyable.
It sounds it. Is this your first managing director's role?
It is.
So it's quite a big leap.
It is.
So with that in mind, I think this is quite an interesting question. How did you find that transition from CTO at DCC into Exertis Enterprise? You know, being such a specialist distributor, quite different to the traditional distribution landscape.
Yeah, it was one that, you know, for me it felt like I'd built up almost an internal glass ceiling when I took the job, and I think it came from a place that usually MDs in our industry come from, either sales directors or FDs, dependent on the type of organisation that you are. Clearly my background is neither of those two things. What I did learn immediately was skills are transferable. I've had a leadership role in numerous companies, as I've just talked to, and I suddenly realised that everything that I'd learned about managing departmental teams, you can equally apply to a board. So, you know, it's very similar in that respect. In terms of a positivity that I didn't expect at all was, think about me being a technologist through all of my career. That stood me in really good stead when I've been working with a lot of our vendors and a lot of our customers, because actually I understand the technologies that we represent. I'm not just understanding the brands, I understand what we can do. And I think it also allows me to challenge each of you around our board table about what we're doing, how we're doing it. I'm not confessing to be the expert in the way that you would be in your segment, but I do feel like I can have an equally competent conversation with you when we talk about your topic. And I think that that's a real positive. And I think that our vendors sometimes see that in me when they interact with me.
Yes, good answer. And I think, yeah, it's all well-founded as well. I think your technical acumen and background's definitely helped you in terms of when you've joined a business like Exertis Enterprise, which is that true specialist, you know, and it leads with technology and value. Yeah. I think that's really important. But you personally, what was your actual approach in the back of your mind? What was your plan coming in? Because you're coming into a business that is obviously very successful, year after year growth, you know, has a good foundation in play. What was your approach? What was your thought process around how do I approach this and get the most out of it?
You know, and I guess, you know, part of it is we've got a culture. There is a distinct culture about our business that doesn't necessarily fit with the same cultures that exist in some of the other technology divisions that are monocled Exertis. And the first thing that I needed to try and understand was what was that culture and how did it work? Because it became very apparent very quickly that the culture is what defines our business and what makes us successful and how the people work within it. The second thing that I did was I didn't rush in. I was really fortunate when I first started that James, who was the outgoing MD, was around for the best part of 4 to 5 months whilst we overlapped. so I could sit and sort of watch what was happening. And I asked a lot of questions. You remember me asking a lot of questions, and I was trying to learn.
It was more of an interrogation.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I definitely, and I describe myself as that why person, and I know that I can come across in that way, but I'm just trying to soak up what we were, and then in reality, in my own way, applying those management skills and the learnings that I got. I think by about month 6, you begin to realise that you're beginning to steer direction, and then once I began to realise I understood the topic, we started to work on changing a little bit about some of what we need to do to be better corporate citizens, but moreover, just trying to give us a bit of a sense of where are we heading and what's the direction for the business.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that. You'll know that for maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, good. Another good answer, mate. Another good answer. Right, due conscious of time, obviously, we're now going to move into the business. Now, this is going to be another 3-minute question, which you didn't succeed on the previous 3-minute question, by the way. So in 3 minutes, can you give the audience a brief overview of Exertis Enterprise, so us as a business, from your perspective?
Okay, so ultimately we are a collection of 4 business units. We've got a very strong pedigree in enterprise class components. So anything that you find in a data center that could be on-premise, could be a colo, or it could be a hyperscaler. Think about all the component parts that are in there, things like disk drives, NVMEs, memory, networking cards, down to processors in system units. So there's a very strong pedigree in our business around components. Then we've got a solutions business, so whether it's tailor-made servers or tailor-made storage solutions, we do really well in that market sector. Then we've got data center, and our data center business is all about not necessarily the hardware that's going in the rack, but the rack itself, if you like, and the cabling that goes through it, the power and protection products that go through it, and the equipment that controls all of the equipment that you put within the rack. So there's a whole facet of what we do there. And then finally, our 4th pillar is our cybersecurity division. So anything from an endpoint security, protecting your laptop, protecting your servers, right through to perimeter security, and then bandwidth optimization and resilience and recovery products. And then we also deploy people services around, giving you accreditations if you need us to help you get accredited as an organization, or if you need to be audited, we've got partners that we will partner up with and we'll audit you in terms of your cybersecurity. Ethos is always about outcomes driven, and it's easy to describe it when I talk about solutions. So when I talk about solutions market, if you think about you've got a specific end case that you want to get to, whether you're an end user or you're a partner, we deploy all of our skills, all of the brands that we represent, and we effectively build you a tailor-made solution, and we build it. We will take it to our production services center and we'll build it for you and make it as close to plug and play as it possibly can be. Not so clear around value added, but definitely there is if you take our components business, it's not just about supply, it's actually about the fact that if you're in an industrial space, you want consistency and continuity in supply. So, it won't be about, can I buy these today? You may be saying to us, can I buy these today, but I need to buy them again in 12 months' time, and I need you to be the consistent supplier of those. So we add that value there. And then finally, if you think about the outcomes-driven organisation that we are, we're one of the only cybersecurity distributors out there in the UK today that we really wrap around a value-added service on our pre- and post-sales technical support. So if you come to us, effectively, we will help you with defining what you need to protect your organisation. And if you've then installed it, we'll actually help you to get it configured and do it in the right way, all as a value-added proposition beyond just buying the physical hardware and licenses from us. So it doesn't matter where you look in our organisation, value add is running through it throughout.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, from what you're telling me, and I obviously understand as well, a lot of the approach seems to be more around adding value, understanding the customer's challenge, and how with the value that we add and the technical acumen that we've got, obviously, and the great vendor portfolio that we have, how we help them overcome that challenge and turn it into opportunity. Could you give us an insight to the kind of customer demographic that Exertis Enterprise work with and sell into?
Yeah, clearly there's not one demographic when you hear me talk about the 4 business units that we've got. If you go back to cybersecurity, largely speaking, we've got two types of customer in that space. One would be dedicated resellers and partners in the cybersecurity market, and the other would be the value-added resellers, that are the ones that are shifting high volumes of firewalls or software licenses. So, typical sort of demographic there, but the former of those two categories is where we add the value. The second is where we grow the category for them. If you look at our solutions business, very much about finding our niche into lots and lots of different verticals. So, if you took something like, we're not out there just talking about how much have we got in stock and what price it's about. We're truly enabling an organisation that may well be in media and broadcast, as an example, that are looking for the smallest footprint to transport around their various media and broadcast locations. If you looked at people that we work with that are in the financial services sector, where what their importance is about the speed and the agility of the transaction within those services. It might also be about the integrity of the data that they've transmitted, but we're utilising our technologies and our partnerships just to provide those answers. So niche verticals, and I could rattle off financial services, media and broadcasting, gaming, marine is another good one for us. So there's a whole bunch of verticals in that space, and then finally, come back to the components type business. Largely, what we're doing there is we're supporting data centers. So a huge data center that might be thinking about doubling its capacity, but not having to think about replacing its entire footprint. So suddenly we can step in with our partners to say, we've just doubled the capacity, but you've maintained most of the 2/3 of the hardware that you invested in 3 years ago. So a whole gambit of people that we work with.
Okay, awesome, absolutely awesome. A huge demographic,
Yeah.
which obviously from the verticals that you're talking about and the different types of customer bases, there is different levels of value that you can add, and it sounds like you go really deep, which is really, really important. And great for Exertis Enterprise and great for our customers as well. Now, obviously, we've had year upon year upon year of growth within Exertis Enterprise, and we've expanded obviously heavily into Europe over the past 10 years, and that continues to grow rapidly. How do you plan, or what are your ideas around maintaining that growth trajectory that we've been on for the past 10 years? What are we doing now that can continue that growth?
Yeah, I mean, the first part is acknowledging the specialisms that we are, and then attracting a wider portfolio of vendors. So, one of the things that has enabled that growth is every single year, and it doesn't matter which category we look at, we add more and more vendors to our portfolio that play in the same space that we do, that allow us to create the value that we do. So that's step number one. Mm-hmm. Step number two is that, relatively speaking, until this point, we're not really that large in Europe. We're in a lot of places in Europe, but in terms of relative market share, so there's an awful lot of opportunity for us to grow into Europe and realise significantly larger amounts of business, and we've been doing that, and that's definitely added into every single one of our categories as we've moved through under my tenure. And then the third and final thing that we do is, the UK market is a very mature market. It's our pedigree, it's where we come from, and most of our operating organisation is based out of the UK. But what we're beginning to do there is divide ourselves not just into technology segments, but into product segments, because dealing with a hyperscaler is very different than dealing with media and broadcast, and actually the opportunities and how you solve those problems by focusing on a specific customer vertical. That's where we'll grow our UK business. So ultimately what we've been doing is vendor, increasing our sales organisations, and then there's a whole bunch of infrastructure aspects that we've invested in, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about.
That was going to be the next one. Look at you, preempting that one. So it's great that we're growing the sales organisation, our vendor portfolio, the skill set and like the human beings, the technical acumen that we have to be able to deliver these types of products, components and solutions to our customers. What investments have we made, or we're looking to make, to accelerate that growth? Because obviously having more people, having more expertise, a stronger portfolio is great, but what are we doing to support that growth fundamentally?
Yeah, so one of the we're nothing without our people, and it's, and I know that that's a cliche that lots of organisations live, but that value that we create comes from what's in here in people's heads, about the knowledge and the understanding, whether you're in the sales organisation or you're in our technical services organisation, and we invest really heavily in trying to enable them. So our enablement programs, our academies that we deploy, we invest really heavily in making sure that we've got the very best out of the people that we've got within the organisation. We took some infrastructure steps. So for one of them was forced into us by Brexit, but it's been phenomenally successful. We opened up a distribution centre in continental Europe because of Brexit and the taxation and the legislation laws that were going to come upon us. That has stood us in so much good stead with both our customers and our vendor relationships being able to ship the very next day in certain instances where required. And then, the last piece, and I heard you talk about it on when you were sat in my seat here being interviewed, that the facility that we built at the back end of last year and we opened in January of this year, we're really, really proud about our production services facility and that value add that they can create. If you came and looked at what we've got now, it's night and day from the old building, and we've got a whole series of rooms that we build our equipment in, that we quality assure them in, and ultimately, capacity-wise, we've taken ourselves from something that was really, really pushed for space and time in terms of utilisation of people to a place where we can now do 4 times the amount that we would have been doing in December of last year.
Excellent.
And then from a storage perspective here in the UK, we've just trebled our storage footprint at the same time by moving into that facility. So, huge investment for us. And then the last piece I'll just comment to is a series of specialities at our sales and commercial organisations that we're investing in pods of people that face into AI and data centre and integration type aspects of our business.
Fantastic. That's great. Now, before I move on to market, because I think that's really important for the audience that are going to be watching this podcast, I want to talk a little bit about culture. And I know you've touched on it briefly within the conversation, but I've been in this business for 19 years. Many of my peers are well into their 20th year and beyond. In terms of our retention of staff is kind of off the scale in terms of how long people stay here. And obviously our culture is a big element, has a big part to play in that. Give us a little synopsis of the culture and why it's so important to us and the sort of things we do with our amazing staff and why they would stay for so long within our business.
Yeah, I think I like to use the terms that we are big enough to be relevant, but we're small enough to be agile. And the relevance comes with we're a 400 million turnover business. So we're a reasonable sized business, but we're a collection of 220, 225 individuals, and actually most of us know each other. Not particularly well in some cases, but we know by face and by recognition who people are in the organisation, and that fosters a culture of a real can-do attitude through the organisation. So I don't care whether it's down in our production services facility right up to our board. If we've got a collective end point that we need to get to, everybody pulls in the same direction. And it's because we're of that size, we're of that really nice size that big enough to do what we need to do, but as individuals we can steer things and make things happen very, very quickly. And the culture is one of which that it's respecting everybody's ability. So respecting that we've got some highly technical people in our production services people. We've got some really highly technical people in your organisation. We've got really technical people in our cybersecurity division, and without them, we would be half the organisation that we are now. And there's definitely something about it doesn't matter where you sit, you respect that of your colleagues that are around you.
Yeah, I think even that's a great answer, but even from my perspective, a lot of the reason why our retention is so high is there's journeys that people can go on within this organisation, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really important. If you're constantly progressing, 9 times out of 10, there's not a reason to move as long as you know your aspirations are being met. Can you give us some insight around what we do to enable that to actually happen? for people
Yeah.
to move through the business?
Yeah, I mean, again, back to, we're part of an Exertis brand. So what we do leverage is some fantastic employee development schemes that our sister companies have brought to bear. And, what we start with is it's easy to identify the talent and the talent that wants to progress in our organisation. And, the one thing I know that you and I both do is remove those glass ceilings. If someone suddenly thinks, I can't go somewhere because, we never say to them, well, you can't. We will enable them if we see something in them. And then in terms of recognising that, and dealing with it, we'll deploy something like, we've got schemes that take you from just management guiding principles of how does it become and feel like to be a manager, right through to leadership skills in terms of how do you define strategy, how do you define what your market looks like and why you should be going after something. And there's a huge differential between those two areas, but if you're the right person and you want to progress in our organisation, this organisation supports you with that journey, and to be perfectly honest with you, pulls a seat out at the board table and says, come and sit around it and give us some information. There's not an elitist culture in our business, and I think that's so key to why we're successful.
Yeah, great answer. I think it's very true as well. And I am fortunately a product of the development within the business, right? And many of my peers are as well. So yeah, I echo exactly what you've said. Now we're going to move on to market conditions and trends just briefly. Very open-ended subject and one that could go on for hours and hours and hours. But what are your thoughts on the buoyancy and the current condition of the market right now? And could you talk to us about the differences within the UK and Europe as well? Because obviously, when someone sometimes sneezes, the other catches a cold. But from your perspective, being in a role within a business where a lot of your time is spent looking at market conditions, looking at what is coming, looking at what we need to prepare for the future and what direction we're going to take, it'd be great to get a 3 to 5 minute idea of how you see things.
Sitting here, and we're at the back end of August, I would say, and I reflect on the last 6 months, it's been hard work. I think the industry is going through a series of changes, and I think it's been a very turbulent industry for a number of reasons. We'll talk about COVID, and that had an impact on how we saw life, and effectively creating an artificial high when we all came back, and then trying to come back up from that. Then we've got a huge level of global uncertainty that's causing a lot of turbulence around what we can and we can't do, and where we can and can't sell, and even supply. And then, latterly, it's just become, from an economic perspective, harder for people to spend money in recent months. So it's hard work getting to the number at this moment in time, and that makes it sound a bit like it's doom and gloom. But if you sort of give us, give a perspective, you asked me for UK and Europe, largely our project business, so that real value added in some of the verticals that we've created, has slowed in recent months, but we can see that beginning to spring back again. We can see that those project-based organisations are beginning to fire back in, and we'll see some activity there. And then we've been surviving in terms of driving towards our number. Moreover, on our components type business, our components business has been doing incredibly well leading up to this point, even despite the turbulence that I described. I sort of painted a bit of a gloomy picture. But I think it's also on a cusp. I think the industry's on a cusp of traditionally, businesses led the technology direction, and then over a period of time, consumers led the technology direction. And if you think about what's beginning to emerge now with the AI, Google and their AI client, Apple and Microsoft, these are all things that are just in the cusp of coming into the hands of people in the masses. And when they do, they'll fuel ideas. And those ideas will drive more and more AI capability through organisations. And the AI capability will certainly drive demand around what businesses want from their systems and solutions. You can already see the laptop explosion that's about to happen because of AI-enabled laptops. You're going to find AI-enabled servers and the technologies that go in them. So I'm really optimistic about it. I think that, couple that with AI needs data to consume. Well, the reality is that what's the industry we're in industry are providing either solutions that store data or devices in their own right that will store data. So that there's a prediction that something like in the next 5 years, the world's data will increase by 10 times because of what I've just been talking about. And I think that all of those things look really, really positive. If I come all the way back to our value, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of great ideas about what they want AI to do for them, but they're not really understanding how they realise it, and they need people like us and our vendor partnerships to help them realise that, and I think that we're perfectly positioned. So the vendor portfolio that we've got and also our capability as an organisation, I think we're perfectly placed to support what is about to happen.
Okay, so you feel we're on the cusp of things starting to explode again?
I do.
Good. We're now going to move into technology.
Okay.
And I think I know what your answer is going to be based on what you've just said. So I know you're a technology nut. I know that's where you've come from, right? That's where your passion lies. But in terms of technology, what do you think is not the next big thing, but what do you think is going to have the biggest impact on the market from a technology perspective moving forward? And just because I think I know what you're going to say, because you've just spoken about it, can you elaborate on that in terms of what you believe we're doing as a business to help our customers and our vendors take advantage of that opportunity that it actually creates? What sort of things are we doing to help our customers overcome the challenge and turn it into opportunity?
Okay. So PlayStation 5. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? No, of course you're teeing me up to say the AI word again, aren't you? So, and I've just described it. First of all, I'll encapsulate it again. I think proliferation. I think the word I'd use is doesn't matter what I look at. Proliferation of devices that utilise AI. Proliferation of security, because the more and more data that you're going to consume, probably the more and more security that you're going to need. And by the way, AI is going to help to facilitate breaching security, so you're going to have to be cleverer and smarter to deal with that. So absolutely, proliferation is one of the things that will happen. I hinted at it earlier around helping people on their journey. And I think that there's a bit of a situation where I know what I want to achieve, I've got this great idea, but I've no idea how to get there. And I might be thinking about, I need a data scientist, but I don't really know what data scientist, but people tell me I need a data scientist to help me on that journey. I think that there's somebody that sits in the middle of all of that demystifies it for people. And that somebody, surprise, surprise, is us, right? And if you look at some of the partnerships that we've got, there's an awful lot of work that people go beyond just the physical hardware that provides the solution. There's a whole load of enablement suites and libraries of software that just take all of the hard yards out of trying to get to the endpoint and the advice. And I think you need somebody to help you and hold your hand through all of that. And what are we doing? It's pretty similar to what we've always done, but actually what it is in this particular market, this AI market, we are building AI speciality. So, we've got AI pods running out of our European territory. So we've got multilingual AI pods that run out of our European community, and we've educated ourselves and our commercial organisations about what they can and they can't talk about at that point. And then you'll know yourself here in the UK, we've got both AI pods in commercial and AI pods in sales. Just try to help people with how do you get from that great idea to a solution answer. And, once you get to the solution answer, our traditional model kicks back in again, and guess what? We'll design it, we'll build it, and we'll make it as close to plug and play as it needs to be for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great answer. It's about creating that ecosystem, because that's what, to deliver a true turnkey AI solution, that's what it is. It's creating an ecosystem of both hardware, software, services, and skill set to enable people to actually deliver that AI solution. So yeah, great answer. Now, you and I could talk about technology for days and markets probably for weeks. but obviously conscious of time once again. I think this was only supposed to be a 15-minute podcast, but
Has it become like Ben Hur?
I reckon we're into the 30 minutes already. So we're going to move on to some different types of questions that are not so work related, to really bring out the true Jason Chibnall, so everybody get to see what you're like, your dark side. Hopefully not too dark. So look, what we did, went out to a couple of your board members and asked them.
This is the apprehensive bit.
What would you ask Jason in a podcast environment? They're all very tame, to be fair. I'm slightly disappointed, but then again, we have got a big HR department, and this is going out to the public domain, so we've got to be careful. So, first question, coming from Nick Powling, who's our commercial director for our components division. Favourite technology, right? We know you're a tech enthusiast, but what one piece of technology could you just not live without, and why?
I think I could answer the phone. I think the ubiquity of the phone and what it does for us on our daily lives, and that device is boring. It gets to give a bit of insight about me, and it's not one piece of technology, it's two. I'm a music fanatic. I love listening to music, and I've regularly in my house will have Party for One, much to the annoyance of my son and my wife, but using my Sonos. I've got Sonos everywhere in the house, and I love at the weekends just sitting and listening to music. And on the same theme, my Apple AirPods that are always in my pocket, and I'm fishing.
I was going to say, did they buy you some headphones for Christmas or something?
No,
like that?
they have to put up with me. But they're the two bits that I really do enjoy, is just the being able to consume music.
Okay, good. Any favourite type of genre of music?
Pretty eclectic, really. Anything from rap to
wow, really?
Yeah, I've got a touch on a little bit on classical, but not much, and then pretty much the sort of the 80s and 90s Britpop scene. I'm very much into some of those bands.
Okay, good answer. Not going for the phone as well. I like it. A question from Matt Croucher, who's our finance director, as you know so well, and I'm sure you pester him every single day on the phone. Embarrassing moments. I like this, typical Matt, isn't it? What's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you during a business meeting? Keep it clean.
Yeah. I could tell you that wouldn't be a clean one, but I think one, if you think about my career history, I've run a lot of big projects, and there was a particular project that I was running that had about 75 people internally and about 200 people externally running the project, and or working on the project. And the company that we partnered up with had sort of been underperforming, and I had a bit of a bee in my bonnet about working hours. And we were having a meeting, and we were in one of those classic glass offices, the four-sided glass office. And I looked out, and I could see this guy in the background that was just browsing the internet. So I sort of said, and by the way, I'm not paying X per day to have your team out there sitting and browsing the internet in my project. And these two guys from this supplier just looked at me, and then they said, yeah, it's really interesting, but he works for you. and I never felt so embarrassed, that I didn't quite realise I was pointing out somebody and I'd really given them a tough time. But that was one that I sort of shrank back into my shell after I said.
Mate, brilliant. What a faux pas. I love it. I'm sure we've all been there. A question for Phil Brown, Sales Director, UK Sales Director. His question is, if you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, doesn't need to be technology related, by the way, who would it be and why?
Who would it be? I'd probably pick two people that you won't know, but I did incredibly well. One would be my grandfather, and one would be my father, who are both deceased. My grandfather, just because he was very similar to me, and I think that we would debate. I love a debate, and you probably know that. So I'd like to see how well that debate happened. My father, just because, it'd be nice to have dinner and talk to my dad again.
Yeah.
And then the third person, if I ever think about this, and I think it's really interesting in terms of our company culture, sometimes in big business people make the narrative fit to where they've ended up in their story. And if you think about Jeff Bezos of Amazon, he always talks about it was all customer centric. And I'd love to really get him a few drinks and then ask him, really, when you first built that business, was it about dot-com boom and just being in the place, or was there really a customer culture that prevailed all the way from that day, and have you lived and breathed that, or have you developed that narrative because that's now what Amazon represent? And I think there's something in that question and that answer that might help a lot of us understand whether we should or shouldn't be customer centric in terms of to the level that Amazon are today.
Yeah, I think we could definitely learn a few things.
Yeah.
It's quite a successful guy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quite a successful business, that one. Right, only two more. So let's go, Steve Cowley. He's our sales director for our European business. We all know that you love IT and you eat, sleep and breathe it. And you might be the only person that was born and wanted to go into IT. I'm not sure yet. But if you were, that's quite sad. But what would be your dream job outside of IT? When you was at school, what did you want to be?
Probably acting. I liked drama.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I liked drama when I was a kid. And I'm sort of one of those people that I don't really want to do it. And then when I start doing it, I get into my own, I get into my stride. So I'd like to be an actor, I think, if I had the talent.
Really? What sort of acting do you think?
I'd like to, not now.
On stage, on film?
On definitely on film, not on stage.
Yeah.
I think doing something on film and TV would have been good.
Excellent, brilliant. Right, last question. And this is from Dominic Riles, who's our sales director for our security business, sales and commercial director, sorry, Dom. And I like this one. This is my favourite question, by the way. For anyone out there, or maybe a younger Jason Chibnall, what advice would you give them on their career? Right, they're starting their career today. Right, they've just joined Exertis Enterprise as an example, or any sort of job. What, from your years of experience and knowledge that you've built up and advice that you've given people, coaching, mentoring, stuff like that, what would that one bit of advice you give them? And the more inspirational, the better. I love a quote.
I think the first thing that you reflect on yourself, don't you? And where have your successes come from? So the first part of the answer probably comes from a place of always be inquisitive, but be respectful. So I think if you start in a business and you ask lots of questions, be inquisitive, but in a respectful way. That why have you done that is not a respectful way, but I don't understand why that should look like that, or why you do that way is a much different way. And I think what it does is that inquisitiveness and doing it in a way that's collegiate and respectful of your colleagues makes you a much more rounded individual in a business, and it makes you ready for the next step. I think if you build up that armory of understanding. And then the second piece that I live in myself by is, and I've sort of put this out there a number of times, I believe that most of us are successful with our colleagues because we trust each other in some way, shape or form. And when you get that trust, people want to help each other to get to the end point of whatever it is. And I believe, my phrase that I use is, give a bit of yourself to get a bit of somebody back.
Yeah.
And that ranges from knock down those hierarchical barriers. Go and just talk to people. And if you've had a row with your wife, you don't need to tell them what the row's about, but acknowledge that you're human and you have a row with your wife or your partner or, whatever the scenario is. But it breaks those barriers down. Talk about what you've been doing at the weekend and ask them what they've been doing at the weekend. And suddenly you build up a relationship with people and they begin to give you a bit back. And then suddenly when the work context comes into play, it's so much easier.
Less of a job, isn't it?
Drive stuff across the line. So they would be, my two things that I'd marry together. I go, be inquisitive and be respectful. Give a bit of yourself and you'll get a bit of back from other people.
Great advice. Managing Director of Exertis Enterprise.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect way to end this interview.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I'd like to say, good. Huge thank you for participating in this podcast. I think it's really important for a managing director of a business like ours to share your thoughts around your personal self, but the business, technology trends, stuff like that, and being so open for us. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
For everybody watching this podcast, please stay tuned for more, and please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much. Cheers, Joe.